Another thing that is can't miss is Aaron Freeman and his feedback on a Falcons draft. So if there's anybody, Aaron, whom I want to talk to after it's all said and done for a Falcons draft, if it's not Jarvis, it's absolutely you. So let's go right in because I know you got thoughts. So of course, we talked about Bijan Robinson. That's the kind of the no-brainer because okay, he's your first pick, and everybody kind of went up and down. To me, it got more intriguing after day one, round one, because you wanted to see what the Falcons were going to do. Were they actually going to try to shore up the trenches? Were they going to get a little more help in the secondary? Where exactly were they going to go? And as you know, they did go and get help 2 times over in the trenches on the offensive side, 1 time on the defensive side, and then, of course, shored up a couple guys for the secondary as well. How do you feel overall? How do you feel about this draft class for the Falcons in its entirety?
I feel pretty good about it, right? With Bijan, certainly controversial pick at the top of the draft due to, is that a need for the Falcons? Do you take a running back that high? No one doubts Bijan's skill level. Everybody agrees that he was one of the best players in this draft class, but you did wonder a little bit, okay, are the Falcons going to shore up the biggest weakness for them, which is in the trenches? They did that on day 2, getting Matthew Bergeron, the Syracuse left tackle. They're going to move him in the left guard, potentially a plug and play. And I like that move a lot just because on Locked On Falcons over the last 2 years, we've been very critical, let's say, of the Jalen Mayfield selection and the fact that Terry Fontenot and Arthur Smith seemingly were willing to correct the mistake. If that's fair to say, maybe that's a little too harsh to say about Jalen Mayfield, but to be, able to look themselves in the mirror and say, maybe we didn't get this pick right, and let's not double down like a former regime would have done for certain players and say, oh, well, we'll figure out how to get him out of it. And I think with Bergeron, that was a great pick. And then Zach Harrison is just another massive human being. Probably the only person, on the planet that's bigger than Zach Harrison is Calais Campbell. So it's nice to have both of those guys on the Falcons D line and seeing what they can do with that group. So I really liked those 2 picks. And then I think in round 4, you got Clark Phillips, a cornerback from Utah. A lot of people thought he was going to be like a 2nd-round pick. And I think the Falcons are going to get kind of a plug-and-play starter at that nickel cornerback spot. I'm very much looking forward to the competition at that cornerback position. We know A.J. Terrell's good, but the other 2 spots are kind of up in the air with Jeff Okudah and D. Alford and Mike Hughes and now Clark Phillips in the mix. So I think that the Falcons, got a player that could come in and legitimately, jump right into the fray and be a playmaker. The fact that he had, 4 pick sixes, and I think he had like 30 pass breakups in like 31 career games, which is basically he's breaking up a pass every game on average. I've never heard of a college player doing that. So if that translates to the NFL, you're going to get, a playmaker for the Atlanta Falcons in that secondary.
Yeah, and I want to agree with you, of course, co-signing on in the trenches, because like you, I was screaming from the rooftops, and we had a running joke on the show, hashtag defense matters, but really hashtag defense in the trenches matters is what our mantra was. And so I was very encouraged by that. But I also had mentioned in our kind of mock draft running up to the draft opening night on Thursday was this: if by chance the Falcons either moved back in the 1st round, which would have been okay with me as well, or if they were in the 2nd round and they moved up for an O lineman, particularly left guard, let's just be honest, I was going to be good to go with that. And like you said, I was listening to Mike Johnson, who of course is on our station 92.9 The Game, and he talked about the kind of player that you look for who can make that easy move from left tackle to left guard, back to left tackle, and liked what Matthew Bergeron brings to the table. So when you hear from a guy that did it at a high level, it certainly makes you feel more encouraged, if not more confident. But there's also one more that you called out, which I love. Arthur Smith has said from day one that he likes competition, right? And yes, A.J. Terrell, there is no competition. You're just going to go ahead and be in the mix whenever he can't be in the mix. But that position, left corner, is shored up. But I feel like I agree with you. For right corner, yeah, Jeff Okudah may be, quote unquote, in the kind of driver's seat right now, but I still feel like that's up for grabs. I think with the departure of Isaiah Oliver, obviously you needed a nickel guy. So yeah, he can absolutely fit in that space for nickel for Clark Phillips, of course. And I know this was round 7, right? But it did make me feel a little bit better that they at least went after a safety, because I haven't really heard anybody talk about a safety. And again, yes, it's DeMarcco Hellams in the 7th round, but it's still an Alabama player. So an Alabama player in the 7th round hits a little bit different. And honestly, when we look at it, it's like, okay, well, they're not exactly stacked to the hilt at safety. So I just found it very interesting. And maybe you have a quick take on that, but that there wasn't a lot of conversation or even off-season moves, free agency moves to kind of shore up anything in the safety space, but at least they go out and get one and say, well, I mean, okay, we got a guy. We might not have a dude, but we got a guy. And so you've got, Jesse Bates the third at free safety, but it's really just Jalen Hawkins out there at strong safety. And that, I think, like I said, I don't expect necessarily DeMarcco Hellams to be better than Jalen, but I was just looking to see where they were going to start stacking depth as it relates to the safeties.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense because they didn't re-sign Eric Harris, and you were
Yes.
kind of wondering, okay, where's the depth going to come at that position? You need at least another body there. So I think DeMarcco Hellams can come in and do what Eric Harris did last year, which is play special teams.
Yes.
And we'll see if the Falcons, utilize a lot of three safety looks. Will we see a lot of, Jesse Bates and Richie Grant and Jalen Hawkins on the field at the same time, given how stacked their cornerback room seems to have gotten, maybe they can mix and match. So they'll be deep at that position. But I think DeMarcco Hellams, what I really like about him is he's bringing a different type of play style than I think you're getting from Bates and Grant and Hawkins to a certain extent. Cause DeMarcco Hellams, he just likes to hit people. He just wants to come around and just, blast people. He has no problems, filling the run lane, against a 220-pound running back or whatever, just to knock that guy out. So that type of energy, I think, is definitely welcome in that safety room. And what's been so intriguing about this draft, and the Falcons are just so young on the back end. Like the oldest players in that secondary are, Mike Hughes and Jesse Bates, and both of those guys just turned 26 a couple of months ago. So it's a young group, and it really has an opportunity to grow into a really solid unit with, time development and all that stuff as these guys add more experience. But I did like the Hellams pick because he just brings a different energy to that room.
Indeed. And like you mentioned, Richie Grant definitely showed some signs, but then he got injured. So now you're kind of waiting to see how he's going to recover from that injury and going into this next season, what things are going to look like for him. Now, you already mentioned something that a lot of people have talked about, kind of like the conversation has been about the Falcons and what they did or did not do, especially in that first round. But it's kind of a two-parter before we wrap up that I wanted to ask you about. And that is kind of taking a step back. Everyone always looks at the first round, right? And they say, okay, that's the bust or boom player because you better be ready now. But when you've had the challenges that they have had at left guard, I call it left shark, like when Katy Perry performed and that left shark just was doing his own thing on the stage. Yeah. Left guard for the Falcons is like left shark at the Super Bowl. But so for me, I'm like, okay, fine. Some people may say, okay, Bijan Robinson better hit the ground running day one, or he's going to be a bust. But is there any other player that was drafted by the Falcons in this class who you say, okay, if we don't see this pay dividends right away, this is going to be a bust for me as well?
Yeah, I think that left guard position is it, right? If Matthew Bergeron can't win the starting job in training camp, that's not going to be a great look. The Falcons traded up to get him because of the perception. There's been rumors coming out since the draft that the Cowboys were thinking about taking him at the end of round one. And so that was maybe what prompted the Falcons to know that, hey, this guy's not going to maybe last too long. And so for the Falcons to value that player, and given what you just said with the left shark thing, and that position has been so much turmoil these last couple of years, if Bergeron doesn't hit the ground running, and again, you don't expect a rookie to come in and play like an all-pro, but at the very least, he should be able to win that starting job. And then hopefully over the course of the season, you will see him, perform at least a decent level so that you can feel good about his future. Unlike Jalen Mayfield, who, was one of the worst starting guards in the league that year. You're hoping Matthew Bergeron can exceed that level of performance this year. And so, if that doesn't happen, that would be a major concern for me.
Yeah, I think that's a great point as well, because last year having Elijah Wilkinson made you at least feel like you're getting consistency and he's at least solid. You didn't need any, super great play, but you just needed somebody to be over there complimenting Jake Matthews and giving the guy some help. So yeah, that absolutely is it. And that's the same for me, Aaron. I moved past the whole Bijan Robinson controversy. And I was focused on, once that draft class rounded itself out, I want to see what Matthew Bergeron does. Like, my whole focus is on him, because I just feel like, okay, if this line can be completely shored up, if you thought Arthur Smith's scheme and strategy for running the ball last year was effective. Wait until he actually gets a fully competent line. Now we're going to start talking about something. But hey, everydayers, you guys, I know, have thoughts because you tell us all the time in your comments. I'm sure you guys go and tell Aaron comments as well in his Locked On Falcons podcast comments. And of course, you guys tweet us to death. We appreciate that because that means you're watching. So keep coming to ATL Day Ones each and every day. Keep letting us know your thoughts. And like I said, don't forget that Locked On Falcons is out there for you guys to check out as well and support our guy Aaron with all of the great coverage that he brings to the table. You can check us out on YouTube any and at all times, and of course, anywhere else that you download your podcasts.